Usually when people talk about comping, then it's about what chords to play, extensions and voicings, but that's not really what comping is about. There are other things that you want to focus on that are maybe a little bit less obvious, but that doesn't mean that you can't improve them, and you definitely want to, because otherwise you're going to get fired.
You're fired.
The upside to this is that the things that you're going to develop will also mean that you're going to play a lot better solos in quite a few different ways. When I went to jam sessions or sometimes even on gigs, then I always found that the worst type of comping is when the one comping is only thinking about the notes and the voice leading and not taking any responsibility for the groove or the interaction at all. Basic things like listening and having a vocabulary of rhythms and grooves is much more important than knowing a ton of fancy voicings, as you can probably hear in my playing here. But there are some really great ways that you can start to fix this. First thing, let's just get rid of all those fancy chords. If you take a B-flat blues, then you should be able to play through that with 2-note shells, so just the 3rd and the 7th of each chord. When you don't have more material in your chord, then you're not thinking about extensions and colors or how to get to the next chord, so you have a lot more time and energy to focus on being creative with the rhythm and locking in with the rhythm section. While you're working on this, then you probably start to notice how repeating patterns can be really useful. So try to take some rhythms from people you like listening to, make them into riffs that you can take through a progression, and in that way increase your vocabulary. I think Wynton Kelly is a great choice for someone to listen to for this. But a lot of the hard-bop guys are actually really good at laying down a groove like that, so there are a lot of people that you can check out. If you know a recording of somebody comping like this that you think is a really great example, then leave a comment, because it's important to remember that we learn this by hearing how it's supposed to sound and then use that as inspiration for our practice and our own playing. We don't learn this by reading a book or using some sort of rule set. An example of a pattern to practice through a song could be something like this. And you can hear how the consistency that it brings when you take it through the song really helps tie the whole thing together. And actually it keeps it interesting, because whenever you make a variation, then you can really hear that it's something else, because you have a reference. I think this is one of the most underestimated things in comping that will make pretty much everybody sound 10 times better. One thing that can change so much about how you sound when you comp, and especially whether it actually grooves, is to be aware of long and short notes and use that creatively. There is a really big difference between this and something like this. And essentially the rhythm is the same, and I'm only changing between long and short notes. So this is definitely something that you want to explore. When you're playing chords, then melody is one of the most important things to be aware of, that really ties the whole thing together.
You're not thinking of it as, just feeding chords to a soloist. You're thinking of it as you're playing the song. It has melody, it has shape, it has dynamics, it has a story.
So besides rhythm, you want to work on playing strong, natural sounding melodies that make sense, really just to make a story out of the chord progression that you're trying to get across. And that's simply because this does not sound as good as this. And the difference is that the second example has a melody. It is in itself a story with an interesting flow and more surprises. So you can easily hear how that works a lot better. But how do you develop that? There are two things that I think you want to work on here, and they both have some nice side effects for your playing in general. If you want to have great melodies when you're playing chords, then a good way to work on that is to just put chords under some great melodies. So harmonize great songs like jazz standards, make your own chord melody arrangements, like this fairly dense harmonization of There'll Never Be Another You. When you're harmonizing melodies like this, then you're finding practical ways of playing melodies with chords. And that is something you can of course take directly into your comping. And you anyway want to be able to harmonize the melodies that you play with others. When you start improvising melodies in your comping, then it's really just a less active chord solo. And you can start to think in all the melodic tools that you use when you're soloing, like motivic development, or call response. And comping like this, you're really only a few steps away from playing a complete chord solo with harmonized lines, which is one of my favorite things to do. Let's look at what is at the core of comping, or more importantly, how not to get fired. Almost nobody talks about this, but I do think that it is the #1 reason that you will be considered a good sideman. You need to be aware of your role in the band and try to serve the music, not your ego.
With comping in general, I think the thing to do is to establish some kind of repetition. Let the soloist feel, especially in this case where there is no bass, there's nothing, that there's something happening that's, consistent.
What Peter Bernstein is talking about here is the importance of making things clear and being aware of how the music feels. Making other people feel comfortable while playing is incredibly important, and not being afraid to lay down clear harmony for the rest to fly over is, I think, a little bit underestimated.
How do we make people think that it's right here, this is how fast it's going right now? The world is here.
You might want to show your chops and hip rhythms and chords, but you need to know when to do that and when to just support what's going on. Again, with this, repeating patterns are often a good place to start, because you're giving the soloist something that's predictable to build on, and then you can start the conversation from there and go to outer space along the way. In many of my other videos, I talk about how important it is to actually play songs and make music with the things that you practice. For me, that's actually also how I always worked on comping. I think you learn so much from just putting on the metronome on 2 and 4 and then come through a tune. Thinking about how to get it to sound good, what kind of vibe you want, and maybe also trying to develop what's going on. I think that's the best way to work on this, but also something that whenever I ask a student about it, they look at me like it's a completely alien idea.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
When it comes to learning new voicings and expanding your vocabulary, then there is a way to learn and look at jazz chords that's a lot more efficient than just practicing drop 2 and drop 3 inversions. And if you want to connect what you know and have more options to use all those skills that you've developed with these exercises, then check out this video where I go over how to really unify different types of voicings and put it all together in some great comping.